everybody. I am Jennifer Keefe, and this is now Baking with the Keefes. If any of you have seen our other show, Cooking with the Keefes, this is a little bit of a spinoff. In the past, my husband and I, Patrick, have done a show doing some different holiday meals and some demonstrations and recipes for you guys, more leaning towards dinner and supper and cooking. This is going to be dessert. So you'll have your complete meal options from the Keefes. So I generally will be with somebody else. I'm kind of flying solo today, but our hope is to get my daughter Adriana, who is also an incredible baker and super knowledgeable on lots of things, and my son Patrick and my husband will visit us too and help with some baking, even though that's not quite his forte. But all the help we can get is awesome. So today we're going to be making a triple chip blondie. My goal for these shows are going to be to give you recipes that are quick, easy to clean up, that you can throw together with really common ingredients that you should already have at home, and hopefully you'll learn a little something along the way and be able to put these recipes in your back pocket to enjoy with your friends and family. This particular recipe I really think is great for quick after dinner, after school snacks, and really great and easy to bring to a barbecue. So if you're in charge of dessert for a gathering, however small or large, these are a great option. This also will give you some flexibility on different ways you can prepare it, and a couple of different ingredient options too, so that you're able to use up just what you have in your pantry and not have to necessarily run to the store to make these. Triple chip blondies can also be double chip or single chip. You decide what kind of a mixture you want. We're gonna start by adding 1 cup of butter to the mixer. This is where you can kind of do a variation. I'm using softened room temperature butter, and I'm going to be using my mixer. The other option is to melt this butter and get it just melted, not hot. Add that to a bowl with your brown sugar and whisk it by hand, so you don't have to get out your mixer. You don't need to get out your hand mixer. Some of you may not even have a mixer, so this is a great option for anybody, no matter what tools you may have at home. So that's the other option. So melted butter with this, hand whisk, or room temp butter with 2 cups of brown sugar. And let me just get this up here. Working with a mixer that's not my own, still trying to get used to it, but let's see. And you always want to start your mixer, and hopefully you can hear me okay over the noise. On a lowest setting, get your ingredients started to incorporate, that way nothing goes flying out of the bowl too crazily. That goes for a hand mixer as well. And just as it starts to incorporate, go ahead and turn up the heat a little bit. And we're just gonna kind of let that buzz and get going. You want to, this is something that I'll bring up not just for this recipe, but for other recipes. If a recipe calls for you to beat it for a certain amount of time, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, don't ignore those instructions. It's usually for a reason, and I do love that you're able to see into the bowl, because you'll see things start to change. You'll see the texture start to change and the color start to change. So I'm in fear of you not hearing me. I'm gonna just turn this up for 1 more second to really give it a go. And you can kind of see the texture and the color start to change. It'll start to lighten up. And whenever you're incorporating butter and sugar like this, the sugar is poking holes in the butter, and it's gonna give your product a lot more air and lightness and a little bit more of a chew. So that's why you do things like that. There's always a why behind how long you're mixing something and how vigorously. You don't want to ignore those steps in your recipes. And all right, so that looks pretty good. Another point is always scrape your bowl. Get down to the bottom. This is for any mixer, hand or standing, you want to make sure that in between steps, anytime you see product collecting on the bottom of the bowl or sticking to your blade, you want to start to scrape that off. That way you make sure everything's incorporated evenly. So that looks pretty good. And our next step, and even I've made this recipe, I can't tell you how many times, I have to look at my recipe. So that's another good point. Read your recipe through beginning to end before you start. That way, if you are missing any ingredients or you have questions, you can Google it or email me or text me and ask me if you have any questions. So now we're gonna add in the 2 eggs, and I'm doing kind of a no-no. You really should crack these into a separate bowl and then add them, but I feel like I am experienced enough to just crack them in the bowl without getting any shells. But if you're not so comfortable, crack them in a separate bowl, then add them. And then this particular recipe has a lot of vanilla. It really adds a ton of flavor and gives you that caramely, rich flavor that you want from these. So I'm adding 2 tablespoons of vanilla. And vanilla has actually been not that long ago super expensive. So I totally get that. You can use imitation, but I don't ever suggest it. I always go for real vanilla. I get mine, if any of you have like a Costco membership, I get my vanilla at Costco in this large bottle. It lasts a really long time, and it used to be about $30. Right now it's down to about $17 for the big bottle. So compared to what you're spending for the little 1-ounce bottles at Stop and Shop, it might be a good deal if you are gonna be baking a lot. So just keep that in mind. And let's go ahead and whiz this together. And again, I apologize for the noise. And we're gonna get that going. You don't want to see any more of that egg in there. You wanna make sure it's completely incorporated before you stop the mixer. This is a 1-bowl recipe, so you don't need to mix your wet, then mix your dry and add them together. You're gonna see this start to really lighten up in color, which is what we wanna see. That means it's getting fully incorporated and adding lots of air into your product to give you that nice chew, so it's not a super dense bite. And I'm gonna turn it up one more and really get that lightened up. You're also gonna see it's gonna start to increase in volume, so it's gonna look like your product is growing, which it kind of is because you're adding air. And okay, and again, scraping your bowl, making sure all of that is in there. And your eggs add lots of, they actually help to leaven your products. They also help give it lots of structure. This recipe can also be halved. So all the measurements I've given you, if you just cut them right in half and then bake it in an 8x8 pan, you can make it a smaller recipes, because I know a lot of us aren't really going out or gathering just yet. So this is great for a small group too. Next, we're gonna add our dry ingredients. I had pre-measured pretty much everything else, but my flour, I really wanted you to see how I measure it. I have actually become accustomed to weighing a lot of my ingredients because I get a really consistent outcome every single time. That's more of the European way of doing it. I know us here in America, we love our cups and teaspoons and all of that. But if you are gonna stick with a cup measurement, this is how you should measure your dry ingredients. So this goes for powdered sugar, brown sugar, flour, anything light and fluffy like that. And you're gonna spoon and level is the technique that you're gonna use. So I'm spooning it in, I fluff up my flour so there's no big heavy clumps. And you're just gonna scoop it till it's overflowing. And then you can use a butter knife. A lot of like measuring cup sets actually come with these really awesome levelers. So I just chop it like this and then sweep it nice and level, and add that. I'm going to be adding 2.5 cups of flour, and you're just putting that right in the bowl. And yes, this takes an extra minute, but if you want good consistent product and you don't want to add too much flour, flour is really going to make these super cakey if you add too much, really dense and dry, and that is the exact opposite of what we're going for. So you want to make sure you don't skip this step. And again, I'm chopping. I actually learned this technique back in the day when we had home ec and cooking in school, which is so long ago. Go figure. And my cooking teacher, Miss Michelle, who was awesome and loved her, she is who I learned that technique from many, many years ago. Because up until then, I was just scooping my flour and sticking my cup right there in the bag of flour. So again, heaping, get in there, chop it up, and then level it. And you're good to go. So that's 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We're gonna do a teaspoon of baking powder. And I love that this, make sure you level it off. And we're gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And that's it. That's all our dry ingredients. We're gonna go ahead, again, especially with flour or any dry ingredients, start it super low, or you're gonna get a face full of flour and it's not gonna be in your cookies or your bars like you need it to be. So we're gonna start it low and increase it one step at a time, letting it incorporate. You also don't really need to whip these once you put the dry ingredients in. You just want to get it so that all the dry ingredients are incorporated. And that's it. You don't want to do it too much. The more you whip your flour and beat your flour, you're going to develop gluten, which is what is in flour and what gives your baked goods structure and texture. And when you develop that gluten, things get more chewy and dense and it messes with the texture. So again, paying attention to your recipes, not just this one, but any recipe. If it's telling you just mix till the dry ingredients are incorporated, don't go ahead and whip it at high speed for 2 minutes. They give you those instructions for a reason. That's, I guess, the biggest difference between cooking with Patrick and baking. There's not a whole lot of room for wiggle room as far as technique goes. You really want to stick to what the instructions and directions are telling you. You can ad-lib a little bit here and there with some ingredients, which is what we're gonna do next. But generally, you really wanna follow the rules. Next is the chip part. So right here, I have a total of 2 cups of chips. This is where you get to decide what you want. I like a little bit more chocolate, so I have a cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips and a 1/2 cup of butterscotch chips and a 1/2 cup of white chips. The reason I balance it that way is butterscotch chips and white chips are super sweet. So I want to counter that with the semi-sweet chocolate chips, so that's why I do those ratios. You could make these all chocolate. You could do a mix of dark chocolate and milk chocolate. You could do all white chips, all butterscotch chips. They're gonna be way sweeter, but some people really enjoy that. So you do this however you want. Or open your cabinet, and I know I have mismatched things of a little bit of chocolate and a little bit of white, because most recipes don't call for the entire bag. So you end up with all these little mismatches. You could make this a 4-chip bar. If you have dark, semi-sweet, milk, white, toss it all in. As long as it equals 2 cups, you're good to go. And you'll see at the end, had a 1/2 bag of frozen themed mini chips that were blue and white swirled, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna use them up. I don't need them to be blue. It might not look gorgeous, but hey, they're gonna taste really good. So, but for this, I have a cup of chocolate, 1/2 cup of butterscotch, 1/2 cup of white, and you're just dumping those in. And again, start on slow. And you're just gonna mix these. And done. That's it. And you're all done. Your batter's done at this point. Lower the mixer, which doing everything backwards is not that easy. Something I'm gonna have to get used to doing on camera. I'm just gonna take this out. And if you noticed, I saved my wrappers for my butter. And I did that for a reason. One, it's always a great place to place your spatula in between scraping down your bowl. Two, because these are a bar and we're gonna be pressing these into our pan, I use the butter wrappers to not dirty my hands and not get sticky, and I use it to press the batter into the bowl. And I'm gonna try not to be too crazy with cleaning these beaters off. I usually spend a few minutes getting every little last bit of dough off of the beaters, because why not? What else are you doing with it? You wanna make sure they're all in your cookies and you don't mess with the amount you get. So here we go, nice and quick. Add that to the sink and back. So here we go. I'm just gonna scrape these out. Oh, you know what? Real life. I forgot to spray the pan. So what we're gonna do, and I wanted to show you what I use for my baking goods. I use Baker's Joy. You can get this Market Basket, Stop and Shop. It's a baking spray that has a little bit of flour in it. So you could just use Pam. You could do Crisco with a little bit of flour. I like anything with a chip in it. Sometimes tends to stick a little bit more as the chips melt. So I like to do something with a little bit of flour in it. So this, we're just gonna shake and give a really good coating. Make sure you get all your sides and spray that good. And that's it. So that is the Baker's Joy. It has flour in it. So if you are using gluten-free flour or wanting to make these gluten-free, totally possible just swapping out a cup for cup gluten-free flour. These are gonna come out great because there's a lot of moisture because of the butter and the brown sugar. Using a gluten-free flour is not gonna mess too much with your recipe and still give you a really great product. In that case, you're not gonna wanna use this. You'll wanna use just Pam or just Crisco or a little bit of gluten-free flour to dust the pan. So here we go. Scooping these in. And if you guys hear any clicking, I did forget to tell you at the beginning of the show, I actually have a photographer here and I am in the middle of building a website, which will be great if you guys are interested to go to and visit for questions, recipes, anything like that. If you want to just get in touch with me, shoot me an email because you have a question, because you're making something that we've made on the show, you'll be able to easily get in touch with me there, see photos. And she's doing some pictures so that we can get that website up and running soon, which should be sometime in the middle of this month. So keep an eye out. I do have a business that I do some baking, and it's called From Scratch. You can follow me at From Scratch North Shore, either on Instagram or Facebook. And again, my website will be up and running very shortly. And I'm gonna show you how I use these butter wrappers to just kind of press them in, and you can see they're not sticking to the paper. And it makes it a lot easier to press the dough into all of the little corners and even it out, and you don't lose a lot of product that way. And then something else to point out, if you are using the method where you melt the butter instead and not using a mixer and using just by hand whisking it, this batter is not gonna be like a cookie dough like this. It's gonna be a little bit more pourable, so you won't need to push, coax it so much into the pan. You're gonna be able to just kind of pour it and smooth it with your spatula. So once these are all good, I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees. This is a 13x9 baking pan. You can cook this in two 8x8s if you don't have a 13x9. You could, if we decide to half the recipe, you'd also cook that in an 8x8. This is good to go. And we're gonna stick that in the oven. These are gonna bake for about, for the larger size, I'm gonna say closer to 35, 40 minutes. If you are baking the smaller size, you're gonna keep them in for about 20-25 minutes. Again, everyone's oven is different, so 350, 20 to 25 minutes for half a batch, 35 to 40 minutes for a full batch, and they'll be good to go. You can serve them warm. So if you're in a rush and you just can't wait, you can serve these room temp or slightly warm right out of the oven. They cut really nicely. And I'm just gonna move some of this stuff out of the way so we can show you some finished product. And through the magic of television, they were nice and neat and in a pan, and I'm gonna make them look like they just came out of the oven, but we may have taste tested one at my house. So we made them look really pretty and put them on a nice plate. And this is what they look like. So these right here are your triple chip blondies. And I don't know if you can see through the camera, but you can kind of see some of the little blue spots. Those are my frozen chocolate chips that I just kind of threw in there because I just wanted you to see. You can really use anything you really like. Actually, I found caramel chips. Those would be really good in this recipe. Cinnamon chips, anything you have laying around or whatever catches your eye at the store. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was informative and that you learned a little something or at least have a new recipe to try. We're hoping to do a few more shows like this. Again, I'll have a co-host hopefully the next time around so you're not just listening to me. But if you have a recipe that you'd really like to see or a certain something, these are blondies, and if you're my son, why would you eat a blondie when you could eat a brownie? So maybe we'll do some brownies. Anything that you're looking to see. I'm really looking forward to maybe even doing some decorating classes, or I shouldn't say classes, but shows where you can see how to pipe different frostings and how to make a homemade frosting. Don't buy that stuff at the store. Homemade frosting is so easy. So lots of things that we can look forward to making. So please send your feedback and let us know if you have questions. Reach out to me at fromscratchllc.com for any questions or for a copy of the recipe. And again, you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at From Scratch North Shore. And you'll be able to see lots of beautiful photos of baked goods and different recipes. And we look forward to learning with you and cooking and baking with you in the future. Have a great day, guys.